Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Father Larry Holland, an elderly priest in Vancouver, Canada, has recently been in the news after it was disclosed that the hospital where he was recovering from a fractured hip offered to help him die. We look at the story and how the country continues to push for, it's nothing short of euthanizing, but it's called medical aid in dying. Mark Bradford joins us to talk about this. Mark was appointed Fellow for Persons with Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities at the beginning of 2023, and for over 20 years he's been blessed to serve in leadership positions in various church ministries. And now he joins us to talk about this particular issue in Canada. Mark, thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
I'm great, thank you, and thanks for the opportunity. Wish it was a better topic.
Me too. And this is no laughing matter. I want to invite you to share with us the narrative, truncated narrative of what you put in the article on Word on Fire.
Sure. The situation that you referenced with Father Larry Holland is, it's stunning. And what came out of that, it was revealed in an EWTN report on the situation, was that there's this association of medical aid in dying assessors and providers in Canada that have guidelines that they have written that direct the practice of this practice in Canada. And within those guidelines, it says to not make assumptions that just because someone is religious, that they might reject this, so that they should still offer the opportunity for someone to kill themselves or to be killed, even if that person is a nun or a priest or whatever it might be, because they might take them up on the issue. And those guidelines, or this article anyway, alludes to the fact that some have already done that. Now, I could not find any evidence of a nun or a priest accepting medical assistance in dying, as Canada calls it, in the research that I did. But, I don't know. Perhaps they know something we don't, or perhaps there was another end in that statement. But anyway, my point in the article was just to make it very clear that the church's teaching is against physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia, what Canada refers to as medical assistance in or medical aid in dying, and reference the church's ethical and religious directives for Catholic healthcare services, and then turn just to the topic of natural law, because I think with this and the situation with abortion and so many other things, we try to default always to the doctrine of the church on these issues. But really, the prohibition against killing someone as a medical practice is ancient and predates Christ, and even is more universal than just in a Judeo-Christian tradition. So it's flawed at its core, but it's something that is growing and something more and more widely accepted abroad and even here in the United States. We have 13 states in the District of Columbia who now legalize physician-assisted suicide, and there are more on the way, I'm sure.
Can we talk about how they couch the language in these seemingly compassionate euphemisms, medical assistance in dying, simply because this is an attempt to whitewash what is otherwise a horrifying reality?
Yeah, exactly is. And you're right. We tend to find sanitized words. You can put a practice in a white coat, and all of a sudden, to many people, it becomes something that's legitimate and ethical practice. And it's simply not. And we sanitize the language around these practices, like the practice of abortion as well. We talk about assisted reproductive technologies, and we don't talk about the horrors involved in vitro fertilization. So there are all kinds of things that the medical world is I'll say, promoting these days through death, through life, both at the beginning of life and at the end of life, and now in the middle of life, as we've seen with the whole so-called gender-affirming care. There's another euphemism for sterilizing children and young adults who think that they're put in the wrong body, the body of the sex that doesn't equate with who they believe that their gender is. So we have all these euphemisms that try to sanitize practices that are at root horrific.
Can you please talk with me about how Canada is reporting the statistics of euthanized individuals, medically euthanized individuals?
Yeah.
Like, exactly. Are they acknowledging it as a legitimate cause of death? How are they treating this?
Well, yeah, the confusion is that they don't often report the cause of death as this euthanizing practice, but rather they cite the cause of death as the terminal disease or condition that the person had, like cancer. But they may not say in that cancer reported death that the person chose for their life to end and accepted this medical aid in dying. So that's where the statistics get a little confused. The MAID statistics in themselves are horrific enough. And in the MAID statistics, presumably not accounting for those other deaths that aren't reported under MAID, there are 16,499 individuals who died under that provision in Canada in 2024. And MAID is now the fifth leading cause of death in Canada, even if it is being underreported, the actual practice, if that actual practice is being unreported, because the euthanizing practice is not reported as the cause of death, but rather the disease. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. But tell us about the attitude of, say, the Minister of Health of Canada about the data, the sheer numbers of people being killed through euthanasia this way.
Yes, I referenced that in this article. She says, and this is when she presented their sixth annual report on the practice, she says that she was pleased to share the data. And it seems like there should be some embarrassment, some shame, something other than pleasure in citing the data that shows that this practice has become one of the leading causes of death in Canada. It's just a gruesome sort of attitude and approach to it. And it shows that the conventional wisdom in Canada, at least in this community, is it's a positive thing and a benefit to Canadians to be able to kill themselves. Frankly, in a healthcare environment that is underserving patients horribly, and actually even supposedly causing some to request death rather than wait around for medical treatment that might come to them eventually in the healthcare system in Canada.
Can we also discuss, so all of our listeners listening right now, their hearts are in the right place and they know the church's teaching. But undoubtedly, either they know people or they know people who know people who might be considering euthanizing a sick or debilitated family member under the guise of dying with dignity or compassion. Can you please speak the clear teaching of Christ about the life of this person?
Yes. Well, the clear teaching of the church is that life is an inherent good and that it isn't something that can be ended. We don't own our lives. Our lives are given to us as a gift of our Creator, and they're not something that we can choose to do away with at will. These acts are essentially, if it's a physician-assisted suicide, it's an act of suicide. It's an act of self-murder. And if it's a euthanizing practice, that is to say, to distinguish it from someone being given a drug to kill themselves, like is legal in Canada, the Netherlands, Belgium, not in the United States, but the practice of requesting that a physician kill you, that's an act of murder. And those terms come out of a universal understanding of the goodness of life. The inalienable. Our Declaration of Independence talks about life being an unalienable right? It's a good that cannot be taken even by our own choice. It's something that is oriented toward thriving. And even when an individual becomes sick or compromised in some sort of way, our life is not our own to take. And that's the church's perennial teaching on this. The church says, the Catechism says that this practice is an act or a mission which of itself or by its intention causes death in order to eliminate suffering, and that constitutes a murder gravely contrary to the dignity of the human person and to the respect due to the living God as Creator. So it's completely out of bounds, forbidden.
Mark, thank you very, very much for joining us to talk about this.
Pleasure. Thank you.
I've been talking with Mark Bradford, and he's been talking with us about how Canada's progression in medical assistance to dying, euthanizing patients is increasing. Pray and fight against this. I'm Marcus Peter.